One man ended a 20-year mystery Wednesday over who killed 48 women in the so-called Green River killing spree of the 1980s. In a deal to avoid the death penalty, Gary Ridgway pleaded guilty to killing all 48 women, most of them found in the Seattle area. Many victims, relatives of the victims, who included teenage runaways, were in the courtroom when he confessed.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to another True Crime Mysteries video. Thank you all for being here. Today we have our final part of the Gary Ridgway serial killer deep dive. If you haven't yet, go back and watch the other two parts. Otherwise, we're jumping right back into where we left off. Let's get into it. When Gary Ridgway was asked about his first kill, he couldn't really remember. He said that he'd left bodies before Wendy Caulfield in more open places, like against a fence or in the street or a well-walked area. But he didn't see any reports of the killings, so he assumed the women had gained consciousness and walked off. He told the task force that he might have killed a sex worker in the 70s while married to his second wife, that he was on a date and something went wrong, and he might have killed her. Though they could never get the exact details of his first murder, Ridgway admitted to having an interest in killing at an early age. When he was about 16, he remembered seeing a boy playing. He remembered walking up to the boy, taking a knife out of his pocket, and stabbing the little boy in the side. He didn't know the boy, and he didn't know what happened after he ran off clutching his side. He just wanted to know what it felt like to stab someone, and did it. Talking about the boy, he said, quote, "He was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and I was at the right place at the right time. I guess what you'd call it." The task force had actually been able to locate that boy, now a grown man living in California. He had been able to confirm that a boy about 10 years older than him had taken him to the woods and stabbed him. The boy, however, made it to the hospital where he had surgery, and he never returned to school, so the suspect was never found. Once he recovered, his family had moved to California, and that statute of limitations had long passed the assault. So who was Gary Ridgway? Gary Ridgway was born on February 18, 1949 in Salt Lake City, Utah. He was the middle of 3 boys. When he was 11, his family moved to King County, Washington, where they had a house close to the Pacific Highway South, where he ultimately found most of his victims. His father worked as a bus driver, and Ridgway has claimed that his father would bring him along complaining about all the sex workers on the streets that he saw. His mother worked at a department store part-time. Ridgway has said that he wet his bed into his early teens, and his mother would wash his genitals after every incident. He also stated that he had anger and sexual attraction towards his mother, and that he fantasized about killing her.
I didn't really think I had an urge to kill her. I just wanted her to stop. And
But what did you want to do to her?
what did I want to do with her? Just to have her stop and
But how would you do it? What did you think in your head about how you would do it? That's what we're trying to get at. When did you first think about treating your mom violently to get what you wanted her to do?
probably in 4th grade.
Okay, there we go. Fourth,
5th, and 6th was probably up to that grade.
and what was in your mind that you wanted to do to get her to treat you a certain way? What did you want to do to your mom here?
I wanted her to stop being angry at me for not knowing how to...
But she wasn't stopping.
No, she wasn't stopping.
Was she?
No.
She kept picking at you,
She
belittling you,
Mm-hmm.
embarrassing you. I mean, that's pretty clear from yesterday.
Mm-hmm. It happened in school too, so I had...
So what was your way of retaliating against her in your mind? What were you thinking to do to your mom?
I don't know if I was thinking of hurting her. I just wanted her to stop and let me alone. Um, Angry at her for pushing and pushing and pushing on me to remember, and I just couldn't remember, and I just wanted her to stop.
But she didn't.
She didn't know.
She didn't stop. So somewhere in the 4th or 5th grade, that sense of helplessness that you had not being able to get her to stop would very likely have produced thoughts of taking back some power and control over your mom to get the bitch to shut up. I mean, I'm sorry, but Gary, that's what we hear. And that's what one of the things we're looking to get a better understanding of.
During that thing, I usually took it out on other things instead of hurting her. Living things, killing animals.
Okay.
Killing animals. I stabbed a kid one time.
Okay.
Stabbed a kid with a knife.
Tell me about that.
It was down by Chinook, where I used to go to school. And boy was playing. I stabbed him in the side and didn't kill him. And I think it must have been about 6th grade, or I think it was 7th grade. And that was at some time I was breaking out windows, throwing rocks at windows at school.
Not interested in that.
But that's what I took my aggression on. I couldn't take it on my mom. I had to take it on my animals and
How many
the
animals
kids.
did you kill?
I killed a lot of birds, but one cat suffocated in his chest, and shot babies at dogs to hurt them, and threw rocks at my brother. About that time, I think I was getting out of that, though.
You couldn't take your aggressions out on your mom.
No, I couldn't.
But you could think about it.
I could think about it, and
What'd you think?
I thought about hurting her, so she'd shut up and leave me alone, and then
How did you think about hurting your mom?
killing her.
And how would you do that?
I thought with my hands, or I didn't have no guns or anything, so I didn't. It had to have been hands or.
And then after she was dead, what were you going to do in your head?
In my head, I don't know what I would do. I just wanted her to stop.
His mother died a few years before he was arrested, and his father died in the early 90s. Ridgway is believed to have an IQ in the low 80s. He was held back twice in school and graduated in 1969 from Tyee High School. After high school, he joined the Navy. While in the military, he married his high school sweetheart in 1970. He was deployed to the Philippines, which he admitted was his first time experiencing sex workers. In 1971, he was honorably discharged from the Navy and returned home. While he'd been away, his first wife had begun a relationship with another man and had filed for divorce. and they were divorced by 1972. Ridgway would say his wife had become a whore while he was overseas. In August 1971, he started a job at Kenworth Trucking, which he kept for over 30 years until his arrest in 2001. His job was only a few miles north of where he picked up most of his victims. In 1972, he met his second wife. They were married in December 1973, and they lived in several residences during their marriage. In 1975, they had a son named Michael. His second wife would remember that Ridgway liked to have sex outside and had been interested in bondage. He liked to practice walking silently when they walked in the woods, coming up behind her and scaring her. She would report that he often came home later than expected, wet and dirty. In the later years of their marriage, he would come home later and later. At least once, Ridgway admitted that he came up behind his second wife and choked her in what he called a police-style chokehold. After their relationship deteriorated in 1980, they separated. In 1981, their divorce was finalized, and she got full custody of their son. Ridgway then only got to see him on alternate weekends. In November 1981, Ridgway bought his house at 21859 32nd Place South, King County, Washington. This was where, in his 2003 interview, he admitted to taking and killing the majority of his victims. He admitted that he didn't kill any woman in the house for 6 months in 1982 when he had renters living in the house, and he lived alone there until 1985. After his second divorce, Ridgway had several relationships with women. Some he met at organizations for single parents, parents without partners. He even got engaged again and planned to be married in June 1984, but she ultimately ended the engagement after she had met someone else. In February 1985, he met his third wife at the Parents Without Partners group. Several months after they started dating, she moved into his house in Place South. In 1988, they got married. They moved several times, but always stayed in the King County. From 1989 to 1997, Ridgway owned a residence in Des Moines, Washington. He then moved to Auburn, Washington, where he lived until his arrest in 2001. His third wife and many of his ex-girlfriends would be shocked to learn that Gary Ridgway had been killing women during their time dating him. His third wife has talked about how he was an amazing, caring, and involved man, and that they had a good marriage. She said that he was good with his son and her children, and that she loved him at first sight. However, they got divorced in 2002 after his conviction.
Gary had always been a loving husband.
He made me feel like a newlywed every day.
They met in 1985, married in '88. She moved into Gary's modest Rambler in SeaTac, a home where, unbeknownst to her, scores of young women had been brutally murdered. From there, they moved to their dream home in Auburn. Judith describes their life as loving and content. They were surrounded by treasured pets and took many weekend trips that hold fond memories even today.
What I miss the most is the love that I had in our life. And he was the best. To me, anyway.
That's why it was easy for Gary to convince her his arrest was just a case of mistaken identity.
He was reassuring me that everything would be okay, and it was painful.
Painful in part because the pieces just didn't fit. Gary had never raised a hand to her, never even raised his voice. And if he was away from home, he always had a logical explanation. He was working overtime at Kenworth or attending a union meeting.
You never saw anything suspicious?
No.
Still, detectives went through the Ridgways' cozy home with a fine-tooth comb. This never-before-seen video shows the aftermath of a necessary but intrusive search that sent Judith reeling. Investigators seized her jewelry and some of her clothing, convinced they could be trophies Gary took from his victims. Still, in Judith's mind, Gary was innocent.
I was still in just such denial.
And then a series of discoveries and photographs shattered Judith's trust. Suddenly, all the pieces that didn't fit began to fall into place.
Judith found a stash of condoms in the couple's garage. Detectives found more stuffed in the framework of Gary's pickup truck. And it gets worse. They tore Judith's car apart. The crime lab found traces of semen. Investigators told Judith Gary had probably used her car to pick up some of his victims.
Then I felt the anger that he had sex with someone else, that he hurt me, that he betrayed me. He said he did not do anything with those women. But then when I found the condoms and stuff, then I realized that he did.
But for Judith, there would be one more staggering surprise. Gary had killed 4 of his 48 victims during the years he was with her.
Oh, I'd say, why, you son of a bitch, why did you do this to me? Why did you put me through all this?
And why, Judith thought, did he kill all those women?
Do you think about the women and their families?
Oh, yes. My heart goes out to all of the families and the victims that he hurt, and I can't even imagine what they've been through.
And what about him, the man she believed was her Prince Charming? Judith refuses to visit Gary in prison. She won't take his calls, and she told him to stop writing letters. But her heart is still conflicted.
Do you love him?
No. I love the man I knew, and I hate the man that took him away.
Law enforcement believed that Ridgway got away with his crimes for so long because he didn't fit popular perceptions of a serial killer at the time. He wasn't a loner. He'd always been in a relationship or married. He had no violent criminal history. He was steadily employed for 30 years. After his arrest and confessions, his brother came forward saying that he had never displayed any abnormal behavior in front of him. The people who knew Gary Ridgway best didn't know him at all. Gary Ridgway is considered to be one of America's most prolific serial killers, having been convicted of 49 murders and is believed to have killed more than 70 women between 1982 and 2001. At that time, only one known victim had escaped Ridgway, Rebecca Guay, and her case could never go to trial as a statute of limitations had passed by 2003. These are Gary Ridgway's confirmed victims. Gary Ridgway had 3 unidentified victims. One victim was known previously as Bones 10, but was identified in 2020 as Wendy Stevens, who was Ridgway's youngest victim at 14 years old. She had run away from her home in Denver, Colorado in 1983, and her remains were found in March 1984. The last 2 unknown victims are called Jane Doe B-17, who was found in 1986, and Jane Doe B-20, who was found with the help of Ridgway in 2003. Authorities are still hopeful to identify both victims.
Ridgway confessed to 49 murders over the course of several years back in 2003 and has been rotting away in a cell ever since. But detectives have still been trying to place names with a couple of his unidentified victims, including a young woman whose remains were found in southeast King County in January of 1986. Forensic evidence suggests she was in her mid to late teens when Ridgway killed her, and she may have been from out of state. This now is how they believe the woman looked after they used, in easy-to-understand terms, DNA analysis from a company called Parabon Labs to isolate her genetic makeup in terms of hair color, eye color, and the like, and with the help of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children that was able to put this composite sketch together.
Creating the structure of what we think this child's face could be, and that's using a 3D modeling software based on a CT scan of the skeletal remains. That 3D modeling software allows us to put digital clay on top of the skull in order to create a facial approximation as to what we think she could have looked like. The goal of that is to obviously get the face out to as many people in the public through whatever means we can.
Authorities believe that there may still be more victims out there. We may never know the exact number that Ridgway killed. Gary Ridgway currently resides in the Washington State Penitentiary in Walla Walla. He will never be free, and he will die in prison. Well, that's going to be it for this video. Again, I only do these serial killer deep dives a couple times a year. There are lots of work to put together. If you want me to do these more often, please let me know by liking the video and commenting down below. Who do you want me to cover next? As always, if you want to support the channel, the easiest way is to hit the like button. You can also subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss my next upload. Other ways to support the channel by joining my Patreon or channel membership. I also have merch, and you'll find all the links in the description box, plus a few extras. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter for more. But with that being said, thank you so much for being here and supporting what I do. It is very much appreciated. That's it for me. I'll see you on the next one. Bye for now.